Hello and welcome to episode 332 of the Stacey West podcast. This is the voice you all like to hear. It is the voice of your main host, Gary Hutchinson. I am back with a vengeance after having a Sunday off, and I am joined by, I'd call him the Spanish Wanderer, but that opens up a whole can of worms about foreign territories and English soil. So instead, I'll just introduce him as Charlie B. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm very well. It could very much create a whole geopolitical disaster if we mentioned that on the podcast. But in all fairness, I was over in Spain on Sunday watching some football as well. So not quite as good as the trip to Germany that you and Chris would have had. But yeah, I tried to get in a little bit of local football.
No, so we are 1 minute into the podcast, and I've already had the phone call from Fee for people wanting to know. She always manages to either call when I'm recording the podcast or recording my having dinner. So unfortunately, I shall have to end that. It's been an odd day for me today. Fee's obviously been away. I've had the dog to take grooming. We've had a sofa delivered. It's just literally been non-stop. It really has. I've cut myself trimming a hedge, and I've done a day's work as well. So it is all systems go. You posted a screenshot earlier of your view, and it was it was a bit wet and miserable, though, wasn't it?
It's not great weather at the moment. The whole of the Costa del Sol has currently got massive flood warnings. Luckily, it seems as though we're going to be escaping it. We had a 2-hour-long torrential downpour, but it's fine now, which is good because I'm off out after the podcast to go and play bingo.
Sorry. I know you look 50, but...
Hey, don't go dissing bingo.
There's a group of people in rugby, Dave may or may not have gone before, go to something called bongo bingo, which where they get dressed up or something. Oh.
Yeah, that's isn't that like a big drunken bingo thing? You see, I play sophisticated bingo where I'm the youngest person in there by about 40 years.
So do you have a little dabber? Do you have your own dabber and multiple cards?
I'm not going to comment because I'm...
Do you have your own dabber?
So I did not have a dabber, although my friend who I go with has gone out and purchased the dabbers today for us for later on.
No, you don't have your own dabber.
Yeah,
just remind the listeners how old you are.
I am 21 in the prime of my life, enjoying every second of bingo. And look, it's in the casino, okay? They have a 40-minute break in the middle where we go down and play roulette. But it's fun.
Get your dabber out. Get your dabber out. We've got to give something for Stu Wells to clip up, haven't we? Honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what? Fair play to you. Fair play to you. You're making the most of life out there in Gibraltar in the rain, aren't you? I'm just going to sit here on my own tonight, uploading podcasts and editing videos and stuff like that. So, yeah, wow. Should we talk a little bit about some football?
I think we should.
I think we should as well, because it's what the people want to hear. I don't think they want to hear about you and your dabber. So last night we were in the BSM trophy, the whatever you want to call it, EFL trophy, Mickey Mouse trophy. It's been 1,000,001 things. And we recorded our best ever win in the competition. Now, the previous record was 4-0 set against Hartlepool in 1985. And after that, I think we beat Accrington 4-0 in 2020-21. 5-0 is the biggest win in the competition. Now, it's quite bizarre because when the team came out, and we'll talk about the team selection in depth, I messaged Chris and said, have you seen the team? And he came back with, it'll be 5-0 one way or the other. And I just looked at it and thought, we're playing 11 of the so-called best kids in England, and we don't have a recognised centre-back. It's going to be a massacre, was my thought. And maybe I am an eternal pessimist, who knows? Now, let's have a look at that team selection. I think the question I'll ask you is, which bit surprised you the most? Because there was so many surprises in it, from formation and positioning, but which bit surprised you the most about the team selection?
I mean, it's obvious, of course, but just the fact there was no recognised centre-backs on the pitch. I understand the EFL Trophy. We want to go through. We want to have engaging, enjoyable football and all of this, but there also becomes a point where it is the competition where you can experiment a little in. Maybe if we had a couple of academy centre-backs, we've seen the likes of, before he left the club, Hayden can play in games like this. But to not have a single registered centre-back in the game massively shocked me the most.
I think I was trying to drive at actual players, but it's fine, Charlie. Dodge the question. It's not a problem.
If you'd like.
For me, it was Oshin playing at centre-half. And we're going to talk about certain players, and there'll be plaudits lavished on one or two. And there's been plenty in the hours since. But actually, Oshin, for me, playing centre-half when he's a central midfielder against arguably some of the finest young strikers in the country, blah, blah, blah. That's the rhetoric. Not sure that's entirely the case. I thought I didn't notice him. And I think that's the best way to describe it. So odd formation as well. Two attacking midfielders in holding midfield, so to speak, in Moylan and McKinnon. A kind of three behind the striker, which are all strikers. Rob Street out wide on the right. I mean, it was kind of exciting, wasn't it, when it kicked off to see who's going to play where? It was like a mashup, like if you watch a regular series on television and then you suddenly get a spin-off and it's like, ooh, what regular characters are going to pop up? Like Better Call Saul. It was like Better Call Saul from Breaking Bad, wasn't it? With the focus on completely different people and everything just a little bit jumbled up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of the most exciting part of it, because we can sit here and try and analyze a formation on, a team sheet that's just done in number order or whatever. But then to try and dissect exactly who is going to be going where and exactly what kind of roles they're going to be playing in those positions was an exciting kind of aspect to it. I think it kind of reminded me a little bit, obviously to a much, much more extreme version last night, but it reminded me a lot of the build-up to Barnsley away last season, where I think it was Danny Mandroiu playing in central midfield in sort of a little bit more of a holding role at the time, because we were running a little bit low on midfielders. And there was kind of this air going into the game. I remember walking into the stand where everybody just sat there talking around about, what on earth kind of formation are we going to be playing? This seems like we're going really attacking. This is going to go one of two ways. This could be a 4-3 sort of game. And obviously then it worked out with 1-5-1. Here it worked out with 1-5-9. I just don't think we need to play with defensive players again. I think Michael Skubala's kind of cracked the system, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, back in the 40s and 50s, you used to play with 5 forwards, didn't you? Inside half and all that sort of thing.
No, there. You'll have to explain it to me.
Andy Pearson will tell you he used to referee games at that level. I've never quite been there. No, it's quite right. And I listened to Michael Skubala's pre-match interview, and it almost felt like he was not trying to convince us, because he was saying, we'll put a team out to win the game, and you kind of go in, I've put a team out to win the game. 5 strikers. I'm not so sure about that. And every time we've played cup games, and he says we've put a team out to win the game, we've actually done really badly. And when you think about some of his cup results, okay, there's the 2-1 win against Grimsby, but that was a last-minute goal. We've lost to Harrogate, we've lost to Chesterfield, we've lost to Accrington. Granted, the FA Cup is a little bit different. So when it comes to these minority trophies, actually, we haven't done particularly well under Skubala. But now in 2 cup games, he's shaken that off. He's won 3 cup games on the spin, but in 2 games, we've scored 9 goals. Now, we expected Man City to come out all guns blazing. They've got players in there who have been picked, as we'll talk about in a bit, for England under 20. We've got ones that have played international, not international, Champions League. We've got a Premier League player, the centre half, played in the Premier League for him at the weekend. So, this isn't a Newcastle kid. And I was talking to one of the players before the season started. I won't say which one because it's not entirely fair. And he was saying, it's pointless playing these under 21 teams. He goes, because you play Wolves and you play Newcastle and you play whoever else, and their under 21 teams are not very good, because the elite players go to Man City, Man United. Yeah, you get that, and you get international players there and all that sort of thing. But by the time you get to Newcastle under 21s, they are not as good as a League One side. It is that simple. No matter how technically good they are still young boys playing against men. The same player said to me, it's only really a challenge when you're playing against a Man City, a Man United, Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea. They're the 5, aren't they? Outside of that, it's much of a muchness. Even Spurs under 21s. So this should have been big. And people were messaging me beforehand going, Emil Heskey's kid plays for him. He's really good. They've got this lad who was at West Ham. He's really good. This player's really good. That player's really good. And I thought we started really well. What was it, 6 minutes in? And it's a cracking goal for Fred.
Yeah, it was an incredible goal with an incredible ball. But I just want to touch on exactly what you were just saying there, because a lot of these players, I may have mentioned it on the podcast before, similarly to Chris, kind of like Football Manager a little bit. I do enjoy a bit of Football Manager. And there are so many names in, for example, the Man City's under-21s that I recognise just as much for their Football Manager ability than I do for their actual playing ability, because I don't really watch much under-21s football. But there are a couple of players, and I want to pick up on them. Simpson Pusey, who started at centre-half, the number 66, who, as I put in the group chat yesterday, he played for them against Brighton, played a full 90 minutes on Saturday in the Premier League. Okay, he didn't exactly have a great game and they did lose, but he's playing for Manchester City, one of, if not the best teams in the country or even in Europe or in the world. And then you've got Josh Wilson-Esbrand, who's had top-level loans into the Championship and into the French League top division. And you just sit there and you think, those are very high-quality players. And we've put out this team, okay, it's going to be a bit of fun, it's going to be experimental, we still want to win. But we've kind of got a right to be a little bit worried, especially as what you were just saying there. But
just say
we obviously... Go on.
Sorry, while we pick up on the players that are good, and it's really easy to do that, actually, when we look back at Manchester City's and Man United's that we've played before, there's 4 or 5 players that go on to do well. 5 or 6 of that squad will either be out of contract or playing League 2 football in 6 years.
Absolutely, but if you had a League 1 squad that had 5 or 6 players of top level quality, again, and then the rest of them maybe a little bit more as passengers, if we are going to use that term, you'd still expect them to be able to not get destroyed in quite the same way. If we look at some of the teams that we have destroyed over the last couple of seasons, I'm thinking Cambridge, for example, and they're always the team that I think we seem to pick on this podcast. But for example, with Cambridge, there's very few players that they've really had over the last season or 2 seasons that you really think are standout stars. Whereas at least with those, for example, the Chelsea under-21 team from a few years back, they had Ethan Ampadu, who went on to play loads of games for both Leeds and RB Leipzig. You got the likes of Callum Hudson-Odoi, I think, played in that game. So all you need is a few star players to make a game very, very difficult. But obviously, we didn't do that, and we have the star players of our own, like Freddie Draper with the goal yesterday.
Yeah, let's bin off Man City now. I'm sick of talking about them. Let's talk about Lincoln City. Because it's Man City under 21s, and actually it was the players that were around 21, 22 for Lincoln that really impressed me. And the opening goal typified that, because I think it was a McKinnon pass, a McKinnon cross. I mean, I am effusive in my praise for JJ McKinnon, and I know that he won't break through playing 35 games, starting 35 games this season, but I think in 2 or 3 seasons he's going to be outstanding. Great delivery, lovely little flicked header from Fred, who's not that much older, if at all, the players that he was playing against, but he bullied them and he looked like a man playing boys football. I thought throughout the first 45 minutes.
Yeah, 100%. And, we talk about the turnaround for the likes of Jovan Makama all the time. We know where he came from at the start of last season. But Fred's had, okay, it might have been a slightly longer, if you like, process, but the turnaround that he's had from, away at Chippenham, for example, in another cup game, to the game yesterday. And, okay, he may have got some undue stick in that game away at Chippenham. But in that game, he did look like a boy playing against men. And now he's managed to flip it totally on its head, which again is really impressive. And like you say, he is basically the same age, if not younger, as the opposing striker was for Manchester City. And JJ McKinnon, what a game he had yesterday. There's so many players that we will end up picking up on throughout the podcast that had great games yesterday. But he's one of those who I thought just excelled, possibly more than any of the others. And I was really, really impressed with him. And I just hope that we can see a little bit more of him throughout the league. And we've got so many options in those sort of positions, those kind of attacking midfield options, playmakers in the middle. We're talking about Jack Moylan. He needs to be starting week in, week out, as everybody seems to be saying on social media. But then we're kind of forgetting the likes of JJ McKinnon. He can do very similar, exciting things moving the ball forward.
Yeah, we've got Tom Bayliss to come back eventually as well, more experienced and probably the first choice out of the 3. But you go into these games and you want players to make a claim. We wanted it. I went to watch the Chesterfield game. Was it Chesterfield or Harrogate? I went to watch one of them with Chris, because you want to see these players do well. You want to see them stand out. And actually, the previous 2 games that I get in this competition, one in the League Cup, you didn't really see players say, I want a place in the first team. Last night, I think you did. So we basically dominated after that. Not possession. I think we only had 33% of the possession, unbelievably, which it felt like a lot more. Second goal, I thought Bailey Cadamartri had a slightly challenging night because he didn't see a huge amount of the ball. Some of the deliveries were just shy, were just short of him. But he got another goal. I think that's 5 now since he's come on loan from Sheffield Wednesday. I may be wrong. I think Jack Moylan's got 4 now this year. I mean, we're spreading the goals around everywhere. But Bailey's was a good goal. Which was the game where he scored with the free header? It was either Northampton or Stockport, where it was an absolutely free header. And it was more or less the same thing again, wasn't it?
Yeah, I can't exactly remember which one it was out of the 2. But yeah, exactly. He's able to find the space, even if the deliveries, for whatever reason, aren't great for 89 minutes of the match. As long as he gets that one, you just feel like he's going to have that great chance to score. And we talk about the amount of different striker options that we've got, but to have somebody that just always knows where the back of the net is, that doesn't need to have too many opportunities at it, but when he does, you know that he's going to at least get a good chance, get a good shot away. That's exactly what we want out of at least one of our options, and that's exactly what Bailey Cadamartri can do. So yeah, I was, again, really impressed with what he was able to show even in a struggling game. And a lovely free header. He shouldn't have had that much space. Obviously, we know that, but we're not going to be just picking apart Man City's under-21s. We would be here all night if we were doing that. And we would get done for cyberbullying, wouldn't we, Gary? But instead, we can just praise Bailey Cadamartri.
Yeah, he pressed well. He worked hard. I mean, I really like the lad. And I keep hearing from people, what we need is an out-and-out striker like Joe Taylor. That's what we're missing. And I argue against that. I'll argue against that all day long. Every single one of our fit strikers, now, including a kid that made his debut from the youth team, has scored this season. That's Rob Street, Zane Okoro, Bailey Cadamartri, Ben House, Freddie Draper, Jovan Makama. So what more can you ask? I think I might be wrong. I think they've shared something like 15 goals between all of them, which is a great place to be. Now, Rob Street could have had his first goal just before half-time from Fred's header. Did you think that was offside? Because I've watched it back, and I think it was marginal.
It's too tactical. I'm not sure. If I'm honest, it's too tactical.
Fair enough. That's that.
There's not much else I can really say to it. It's just I wouldn't want to judge it. I mean, you're asking me to try and judge.
How good point.
So, yeah, that's on you.
Good point. Actually, you might do a better job than David Coote. His judgment seems to be a fair way off at the moment. But
don't get me started on that
one. Talk to me about Rob Street then, because he's been much maligned. Whenever I say much maligned, I always get that line from Ebenezer Good. He's very much maligned and misunderstood. Rob Street. Did he give us a little glimpse last night of what convinced the club to pop a 4-year contract in front of him?
Yes. Quite frankly, because let's think back to the game the other week. Was it Chesterfield at home that he played in? Where he was? No, it was Grimsby away, wasn't it?
Grimsby.
Where he really wasn't too impressive. And it was just before that game where Michael Skubala came in the press conference and said, he's somebody that I really, really like. The only reason he's not getting in is just because of the sort of ability of the rest around him, and he's fighting for his chance, and he'll get his chance, sort of thing. And you'll see what I see in it. And then he had that game, and it really wasn't a great game. And you sort of think, okay, I mean, we trust Michael Skubala, of course we do, but are we trusting his assessment on this one player? And I think there was a lot of kind of mistrust on that singular assessment after even really just that one full game. And the fact that even with his other cameo appearances, he never really showed too much. Yesterday, we've started to see exactly what it was that Michael Skubala was talking about. And it obviously just shows that that's the reason why we need to trust him. I thought that he probably in and around all of the attackers as well probably helped him out, because it kind of gave him that little bit of a freedom rather than being, let's say, stuck up top on his own, which is probably exactly what he needed for like a bit of a breakout game in a Lincoln City shirt. Do I think I can see him starting in the league this weekend? Probably not, but that's not an insult to him. That's just a praise to the rest of the strikers that are around him. He's somebody that hopefully we'll see more and more of over the course of the season, and hopefully he's going to be able to put in similar performances and have the same sort of impact off the bench that we're starting to see from the likes of Jack Moylan week in, week out.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with that. And John Booth picks up a really good point there. The 4-2-3-1 formation worked well with our high pressing game because that bank of three in Okoro, Street and Draper pressed really hard. They worked really hard. Manchester City wanted to play out from the back. So tactically, it wasn't a case of throwing a handful of something at the wall and seeing what sticks. There was a real game plan there, but it just so happened that game plan involved no centre halves. But as it was, we didn't particularly need them given the attacking threat that we faced. So we go in 2-0 at half time. The game's more or less done and dusted at that point. So we pretty much know we're going through. I've seen a comment somewhere, I can't remember where it was, that at 2-0, it just looked like Manchester City's kids just lost it at that. There was no cohesion. There was no communication. You know, they were putting passes astray. You wouldn't expect them to. These are top of the Premier League too. These are meant to be the best of the best. We make the changes at half time and then 1, 2, 3, bang, 3 different scorers. And that means that we've now had 16 different scorers in League and Cup this season. So first of all, we've just talked about him, Rob Street. I thought he took his goal really well, but kudos. And again, it's another one of my favourite players, so I will have to mention it. They were trying to play out from the back, and Sean Rowan at left back pressing so high up the field and winning the ball back to create the goal for Rob. But lovely composure from Rob, not just around the keeper, but then to pick his spot as well.
Absolutely. It's pure naivety from Manchester City's under-21s, obviously. And it was great from Sean Rowan. Yeah, I thought Rob Street having the kind of the confidence actually to go ahead and try and take it around the keeper and not just kind of hit and hope as soon as the ball came to his feet, I was really impressed with. You know, for somebody who he would have probably every right to be a little bit low on confidence in a Lincoln City shirt after, you know, what we were literally just talking about. But the fact that he was able to do that, obviously poor goalkeeping, poor defending, all of that. But for Rob Street, thought he worked it really, really well. And yeah, obviously 3-0 it was done and dusted. At 2-0, although we thought it was done and dusted because of the way that Man City's under-21s were playing, you never quite know what a half-time can bring. And the fact that, you know, we weren't playing with any centre-halves on the pitch for the first half and such, I never quite had that full confidence that we would definitely go on and smash them because there's always that little niggle in the back of your mind. But then that third goal, it just showed that they weren't going to be changing in the second half. We were just going to keep on going. So I was really happy with that.
Definite irony in there that when we did bring a centre half and we played him at left back, yeah, it's almost like we're going. It's like, right, next time I'll fight you with one arm tied behind my back. And I tell you what, I can only punch every other second. We were literally trying to do everything that we could. We may as well have come out blindfolded.
It's funny as well because Man City are probably the team over the last 5-10 years in English football that have probably been the most likely to do something radical with their team selection and formations and such as what Michael Skubala did last night. And also, I believe Pep Guardiola might be stepping down at the end of the season. So I'm telling you, Skubala was interviewing for the job last night. That's what he was doing. It's disgraceful.
So the next goal brings us to, he was the man of the moment. We've gone 23 minutes without really mentioning him at all. He was Tony McHamilton's man of the match on Radio Lincolnshire. He was the sponsor's man of the match. He was the headline writer's dream, the debutant, or making his first start for the club, Zain Okoro. That we can talk about the goal, but his overall game I thought was really impressive. He wanted to get on the ball. He wanted to surge forward. He had a little bit of power about him. He didn't get knocked off very easily. He was pretty strong. I know Michael Horton was raving about him bouncing one of their players around minutes before the goal, but there was a moment just before the goal that, because I went, just to clarify, I went on Twitter and I put "A Star Is Born," and I don't normally do that. I'm not one to get mixed up in hyperbole and all that sort of thing. But when I saw Zain Okoro running from in his own half into the Man City half, he got fouled. The referee didn't give it. He went down. He had the ball at his feet. He still got up and he still forged on again. I'm just like, wow, this boy's got a little bit of something to a degree. And this is not going to sound great to Lincoln City fans, but there was an element of early Lenny John Lewis in his strength and the way he wanted to carry the ball. Because when Lenny John Lewis first burst onto the scene with Lincoln, he was a decent player. He was strong, and he had that kind of youthful naivety almost that I think Zane has got. But then he's also got more class than Lenny, and he proved that with, I'm going to call it a good finish, because I think in League One it gets blocked or the keeper saves it. But it was a good finish, wasn't it? You're going to disagree with me, aren't you?
No. I thought it was a good finish. Yeah.
I thought you were going to disagree with me about it being blocked. With the way I said it, you frowned at me.
Yeah. I guess it depends. The keeper was potentially unsighted at the time, wasn't he? Exactly. But anyway, I agree. I thought it was a fantastic performance, and I saw a tweet earlier on, and I'm not going to kind of mention it in particular, but it was from a friend of the podcast. And to be fair, I very much agree with the sentiment of the tweet of not getting carried away with
Jack,
it was, yeah. But I wasn't. I'm not calling Jack out or anything. I saw it, and I very much agree with the sentiment of the tweet of not getting over carried away after one game or whatever, and I agree with that. But he's now done this, and he had what I thought was a really good cameo appearance against Chesham as well. And let's be honest, probably should have got a goal and such. So I think between both of those appearances now, Nakora has probably proved himself enough to us as fans, and probably to the coaching staff at the club as well, that he's going to be getting more and more opportunities, I think, as this season goes on. Now, what competition that's going to be in, I don't know. I'm not going to be saying that he's not going to be starting in the league this coming Saturday as well, just as I was saying earlier on with Rob Street. But he's showing that he's going to be able to have cameo appearances in numerous games, which I am really, really pleased with. It's great, obviously, when there's an academy player that comes through. And Chris Keneally, who is obviously the screaming mascot of the academy on Twitter, which is great. Whenever I tweet anything on the academy or anything like that, he's always straight in there backing me up, which is brilliant. But yeah, Chris, obviously, as he knows, the academy is such a good structure at the moment. And to see players come through as well, like we could talk about Freddie Joven, we could talk about Joven McCarmel, but they're players that have been in and around the first team for the last 2 or 3 seasons. Zedekor is somebody new to a lot of Lincoln City fans, which is fantastic, because it breathes that kind of fresh breath of air into the football club when you're getting these academy players coming through on a regular basis, and it's a constant revolving door rather than just, you get one good golden generation and then that's it for another 5 or 6 years. So really pleased for that. And like you said, his performance yesterday was just outstanding. He had such confidence both on and off the ball as well, which I thought was really good. His off-the-ball movement, I was really impressed with as well. And obviously, we've already spoken about, and the comments have already spoken about, the system that we played yesterday probably really helped that. But to have him be such a big part of that, the same as what Rob Street was, or the same as what Joven McCarmel or Ben House when he came on was, really impressed with that. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of him, and hope that he'll get some league minutes in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I did buy what Jack was saying, by the way, because we did rave about
as do I.
Huey. Yeah, in the Newcastle game, we raved about Alicia Huey, didn't score. The other debut goals were Jamie Sewell and I can't remember the other one. Another lone player, possibly Robbie Gotts. It was another lone player. I can't remember who it was. But anyway, but at the same time, let's not forget, it took Freddie Draper 9 matches before he scored his first Imps goal, and he scored it in this competition. And I think Joven got his first Lincoln goal on his second appearance for the club away at Barnsley, also in the Football League Trophy. The difference for me wasn't the debut goal. It was Zane's overall impact. But you can put that alongside Alicia Huey's overall impact in that Newcastle game, because he looked the same. He looked a monster. It is easy to build a player up, and the quicker we build them up, the quicker other people wish to knock them down. Whether a loan spell is what we ought to be looking next for Zane, potentially National League North, get him out there, get him some games. I don't know. I did write earlier that I didn't expect him to have a loan spell if he has that sort of impact. A year ago, he plays regularly like Joven did, because we don't have anybody else to come in. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with him. But I'm moving on to my final goal, and I'm really quite excited about this because I thought it was, I get to use one of my favourite words, I thought it was a sumptuous finish from JJ McKinnon. And by the way, created by Dom Jeffries, who had a really good game, who you expected Tendai to look experienced. And in games against the under-21 teams, your experienced players are the ones you tend to lean towards. And I thought of the so-called experienced players, Dom Jeffries, still a young boy, essentially a young man, but I thought he looked really calm and really composed. He's created the goal. But for me, that finish from McKinnon, I've watched it back 3 or 4 times, and it just gets better every time. And I keep saying it, and I'll be shot down, but it's got Peter Gain written all over it. Just an effortless class. And there's a lot to go. Yeah, I'm not saying that's what JJ's going to be every week. I'm not going to say that he's going to explode onto the scene. He's going to do it all the time, because we talk about Peter Gain's brilliance, but he scored something like 30 goals in 221 games. So it wasn't always evident. But there's an effortless class about what JJ McKinnon does. And that's his first goal for the club. And I think it's the first absolute shit pinger, as they call it, that we're going to see of quite a few.
Goal of the month contender, goal of the season contender already. It was a lovely, lovely finish. And do you know what? We were talking earlier on about what a great performance, what a confident performance he had overall yesterday as well, and what a classy midfield performance was. And it just kind of seemed perfectly summed up by that goal. I was so happy for him to get that, because a midfielder having such a massive impact on a game and having such an effortless impact on the game, as you've just mentioned there, can quite often be overlooked by fans and in post-match press conferences and things like that. But then when you can top it off with a goal like that, nobody's going to forget the performance that you had in that game along with that goal. The same with Zane Okoro. If he didn't score yesterday, would we maybe be talking... Oh, okay, yes, because it was a full debut, we would still be talking about it on here. But would fans on social media still be talking about him in such glowing fashion as what they were doing last night? Would he have got man of the match yesterday? Potentially not. But the fact that he got a goal to round off the performance overall means that everybody's remembering that game and that performance from him as well as the goal. And that's the same for JJ McKinnon yesterday. Like you say, we don't know what he's going to be doing in the near future or even in the far future for Lincoln City, but he's somebody who is ours. He's somebody that has got that effortless ability to just be able to bring the ball forward and create opportunities from very little, along with the likes of Dom Jeffries, by the way, who is also an absolute running stalwart and is outstanding. And we've got him for 4 years. Or JJ's 2+2, isn't he? Which at this rate, I definitely can't see us not extending that to make it the full 4. And that's what we're seeing already after only 3 or 4 months. Imagine what we could be seeing after 3 or 4 years from players who are still so young and so far away from potentially their prime.
Yeah. Look, 32 minutes in, we're banging on about Manchester City. We're banging on about a win in the 4th most important trophy against an under-21 team. And I think it's also important to have some grounding, because we laboured to the 2-1 win against Grimsby and we lost against Chesterfield. So it is important just to keep everything, I think, a little bit dampened down. But there was a lot to be positive about last night. Look, we always have to just say this briefly. This competition is controversial. A lot of people don't go. A lot of people think it's pointless. Others will be the other way and they'll argue that it's great. I think it's good for exactly what happened yesterday. For Zane Okoro getting his first start, for goals for strikers who haven't already got one. Rob Street won't care that his goal came against Manchester City kids in the Mickey Mouse Trophy. He's on the score sheet and he had a decent game. And we're talking here about all the players that scored and all that, but literally everybody, I think, that came on had a decent game. Jovan could have made it 6. We had Jack Moylan, who I thought was outstanding in a slightly different role. And again, I'm not getting carried away when I'm saying outstanding. I'm not saying it's going to affect what we do in the league. We saw it a couple of years ago when we beat Shrewsbury 4-1 at their place and then lost 1-0 a week later. We beat Accrington 4-0 at our place and then drew 2-2 with them in the league a couple of weeks later. So we've got to have some context. Luckily, we won't be playing Manchester City under-21s in the league, because that won't happen, even whether you go to the under-21 games or not. It isn't on the table. So what are your final thoughts then, Charlie B, before we move on and give these beautiful people some more of our insights on something that doesn't involve kids?
Crikey. So I think this time last year probably wouldn't have had such a positive outlook on this competition, because there probably wasn't anywhere near as much of a benefit because we were struggling with injuries. We didn't quite have the squad depth. We were sort of getting through the Tuesday night matches. This season, we've got the squad depth where we've got the opportunity to both experiment, but also give those individual players opportunities, which for me is exactly what this competition should be about in the group stages. Yes, we can argue the under-21s shouldn't be in there until the cows come home. They shouldn't, obviously, but it's what's happened. Let's get on with it and let's make the most of it from a Lincoln City point of view.
So, I mean, you say we haven't got injuries. We didn't have many centre-backs last night. But anyway,
we've got strikers.
Yeah, we've got more strikers than anybody. If you're listening at home, we're about to go to an ad break. So here it comes. Of course, if you're not listening at home, we're not going to go to an ad break. So let's do a YouTube exclusive. Ian Tinkler has asked, where would Zayn Okoro play in a 5-3-2, Charlie? Or in our 3-5-2. I mean, I call it 3-5-2, but in our current formation.
Up top, when we have lost 4 of our strikers due to ACL injuries. And that's not an insult to Zayn Okoro.
Christ. That's a bit dark, Charlie. I think you meant position-wise. I don't think you meant like the actual circumstance. Guys, a good job that's not gone on the actual podcast.
Same as Jovan McCarthy last season. He wouldn't, Jovan wouldn't have had anywhere near the amount of minutes last season if both Tyler Walker and Ben House were fully fit. But circumstances did mean that he did get those opportunities. Zayn Okoro isn't going to go ahead and play 90 minutes in any league game between now and, at least, let's say, Easter. But there's a good chance that he's going to be able to do something. Have you got... Can you not hear me?
No, I'm having some problems with my headphones. Just a minute. Let me take that out.
No worries.
Is that all right? You can't hear... I've had to take my headphones out. I think they're too bad.
Yeah, I can hear a massive echo. Can other people hear that? Oh, wait. No, hang on.
Is there an echo?
Couldn't hear it then.
Echo cancellation's off.
Hello?
What's the sound like for people at home? Anybody?
I think there's an echo.
Got an echo.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So these are going to have to come back in. And then we'll come back
this
in.
is an exclusive behind the curtain.
Gary's headphones are buggered. Charlie, give me a 1-2.
1-2.
Yeah, okay. I can just about hear you. Right. We will come back in 3, 2, 1. And welcome back. If you're listening in at home, you will have just had an advert from somebody and they'll give us some money for it. Not a lot of money, but there we go. If you're watching on YouTube, you've obviously just had a brief glimpse into the fact that I need some new headphones. Right, moving on, Charlie. This wasn't on the list, but I'm going to have to mention it anyway. This week, Michael Skubala was linked with the Coventry City job. What were your thoughts on that particular situation?
Rubbish. He ain't leaving. He's got too much unfinished business here, and he's only been here a year. Look, for Michael Skubala to go ahead and progress, because he will be bigger than Lincoln City at some point. I have no doubt in that. But I also don't think that he's the sort of person that would just go at the first championship job that he was linked with or anything like that. He would pick the right club. He would pick the club with the right owners. Not the sort of club who have just gone ahead and sacked Mark Robbins after 6 years and bringing them up from the National League. He is...
From where?
But the National League.
No, League Two.
League
They never
Two.
went in non-league.
You know what I meant. But anyway, he is not... No, he is not the sort of person that would just go ahead and take the jump at the first opportunity. He's the sort of person who would wait for the right opportunity. And honestly... he could be top-end championship rather than a team currently struggling in that division. And like I say, I don't also see him being the sort of person that would leave after just a year.
Fair enough. I mean, it's flattering that our manager's being linked with these jobs. I think it's really good for him. We've had the pleasure of meeting Michael on a couple of occasions, and I think he would make the right decision. But then I felt the same about Danny and Nicky, and Dan and Nick probably didn't make the right decision in terms of where they went. But in timing-wise, they had won trophies. They didn't go when Ipswich were knocking or Sheffield Wednesday were knocking at one point, and they stayed put. So It's kind of flattering. I like it. I don't like people messaging me going, "Oh, Skubala's off to Coventry. He's had a meeting," because I hate all of that kind of in the know bollocks, basically. So, but no, it's flattering. You're quite right. I don't think that if he does go, it would be a Coventry City. If he finishes this season in the top 6 with a 15th, 14th place budget, +8, +9 position, that's what managers get judged on. I've had that conversation with people at the club before. If you're a +9 manager, you finished 9 places higher than your budget suggests you should, and that means you're a good manager. So you could actually finish 15th, but if your budget's 24th, you're a manager people will look at. If you finish 3rd and your budget's 1st, you're a manager that may not be getting looked at. So I think that it is hugely flattering for the club and for Michael.
No, 100% agree. And I'll tell you what's kind of surprising, just as a thought there, as you were saying, that popped into my head. And maybe it's just because it's never really something that's reported on too heavily in the media. Never really heard too much about other clubs trying to poach Jez George in the media. And he's also such a big component to when we finish higher than the budget, because obviously it means that recruitment is done the right way. And of course, that recruitment isn't just him, and it's not just Michael, but it's a combination of full team. But yeah, it's just an interesting point that I don't really think I've heard too much about him being linked.
Yeah, interesting stuff. So that brings us on to, we're recording this 1 year on. So it's 1 year on from Michael Skubala coming in. And he has actually been linked with the jobs before. I think he was linked with the Plymouth job briefly, wasn't he, as well? So, it's been an interesting year. It's been a year that has completely erased the previous 2.5, because whilst I was a Michael Appleton fan and whilst as a podcast we tried our hardest to get behind Mark Kennedy, they were 2.5, but 2 seasons that were really, really difficult. My light has just gone out. Brilliant. There were 2 seasons that were really, really difficult, I think, from a supporter's point of view at times. It seems a long while ago, doesn't it? I mean, it's a year since that Stevenage game, but it seems a long while. That's a pretty good thing. I mean, he's got the 3rd best win rate at present of any Lincoln City manager going back to the war. Only Danny Cowley and Graham Taylor have got a better win rate. Danny Cowley's win rate was predominantly in the National League and League Two, but then it's all relative, I suppose, isn't it? So, what were your thoughts on the first year of Michael Skubala?
I think, first of all, it is crazy to think that it has been a year. A year ago today, I was in my kitchen cooking pasta at my university flat. I can remember it point blank. And I got a message saying, get ready for a live stream at 7:00 or whatever time it was. And we went live that night, spoke about this man who had so much kind of exciting mystery around him, coming from futsal and obviously being in the Leeds under-21 role, and then going into, having been at Loughborough University as well. And there was all of these kind of exciting aspects to Michael Skubala, but at the same time, we didn't know how that would translate to us as a senior League One football club. And needless to say, any kind of doubts that would have ever been in our minds at the time, which I don't really think there were many, but any kind of doubts that there were very, very quickly erased. Even those first few weeks, those first few matches, even though we were struggling, we kept on banging the drum on the podcast of, look, it's going to get better. We know what the issues with the squad were. And then he very quickly showed us in the new year exactly what he wanted to do with this football club and with the squad of players at his disposal. And of course, we had an incredible ride for the second half of last season. And I also just think, as a man, Michael Skubala, I remember you and Chris were the first 2 to meet him from the podcast. And obviously you recorded the special almost a year ago, in a couple of weeks, it'll be a year ago. And you spoke about in there about what presence he had, but also just what a incredible down-to-earth bloke who was also so vastly intelligent about football was like. And I'm like, oh, it sounds great. And then I met him in person and I realized that everything you said was actually an understatement, because it's just him as a person, to be in the same room, you just feel like it's a constant privilege, even though he's not in any way ramming that down your throat. It just feels like you're in such a privileged position to be able to have conversations with this human. Somebody's on the same level as us, as humans, but he also feels a lot more than that, doesn't he? So really pleased, obviously. And I'm looking forward to the next 365 days or 366.
Very good. Yep. Favorite Michael Skubala moment?
Oh, individual moment.
It could be a game.
I'm gonna go with a game, and I'm gonna go with Leyton Orient at home over Easter on Good Friday when we scored late on, because when we had a previous manager, I remember these conversations on the supporters coach on the way back during Mark Kennedy's first season, where I think up until something like March or April, the latest goal that we had scored in the league was something like the 67th minute, or we'd scored one after that. It was ridiculous that we just were not scoring late goals. But then Michael Skubala came in, and we had the immense early goals, but then we also had this never give in, never die attitude towards the end of games, which we've seen again more and more this season. And I just thought that game kind of symbolised that, especially with what it meant with the playoff running as well.
Okay. We've got a couple of other people. Andy Brown thinks Barnsley away, the 5-1 win.
Yep.
John Booth, Wickham away, the 1-1 draw, another late goal.
Yep.
For me, it was the actual moment, and I say a Michael Skubala moment, but it's a Michael Skubala team moment, and it was Portsmouth when their second goal went in, because it was that kind of collective outpouring of admiration for what we had achieved, which was ultimately nothing, by the way. To be fair, we finished 7th. But do you know what I mean? To get ourselves into the playoffs and to give them the march where we won all the games, it was a moment where we were together again, and we hadn't had that since before COVID, because Michael Appleton's first season we weren't together because we weren't there. The second season we wanted Michael Appleton's first season again, and we didn't get it, and that caused fractures. Mark Kennedy split the fan base from the second he opened his mouth until the second he left. There was never that feeling of togetherness, and that moment was the first time, because there was people, already talking about, well, at the Christmas where we lost 4 or 5 in a row, where does Michael Skubala go from here? And it was just that moment. It was, and it was one that I will remember for a very long while, which is strange because it was a defeat, and then this season starts and it's quickly forgotten. But when you write about it and think about it, it was just that culmination of there's more value in not achieving something but recognizing how well you did to get there at times than there is in actually achieving it. Had we got in the playoffs, it would have been right. Now we've got the playoff challenge, and if you fail in the playoffs, maybe we would have had the same thing. But it was a great moment. Right, we've got about 15 minutes left of the podcast. Shall we talk about a long trip down the M5 to Exeter City?
Yeah. Where are you going? I'm not.
I am not for a 12:30 kickoff on a Saturday, unfortunately. No. I would normally have gone. I've got family in Exeter, big Exeter fans. I won't say their name because I think they might be on some lists. But it's there's this fake rivalry with Exeter, isn't there, from the playoffs in 2017-18 and them coming on the pitch and all of that sort of stuff. And I think it's died away pretty quickly. I think it died away the next year when we beat them 3-0 at their place pretty damn quick, which was quite nice if I remember. So we're going to preview Exeter. Ben has done it where that will be live imminently on the YouTube channel. He's done it with Chris Sumner, a friend of mine who used to be the Grecian Bear, I think it was. He used to be the mascot. Really, really nice guy, knowledgeable as well. So that's worth talking about. Now, the first thing that was worth talking about is Gary Caldwell's little moan, isn't it? Because Exeter City have 3 players on international duty this weekend and they can't call the game off. Now, you and I have done some looking into this, and it's actually a little bit, when I say amusing, there's a certain twist of an irony which we'll come into. So they have Josh McGuinness out, who has always been a problem when we've played against him, particularly at Wigan and Hull. He has 11 starts and 1 goal for them. They have got I've written his name down so badly there. It's the Finnish lad, McKinnon. I know, it's terrible, isn't it? 13 starts, 5 goals for them. He's on duty. And now the boy Doyle as well has just been called up. Kamari Doyle, I think it is, called up. 7 starts and 1 goal as well. I think he's got the 3 goals. Sorry, the Finnish lad's got 1 goal. So it's McGuinness 1, Niskanen 1, and Doyle 3. So they've got 5 goals between them. I think they've only scored 14 across the whole season. So they've taken out almost a third of their goals there. Now Gary Caldwell wanted to call the game off, but Doyle was on the standby list for England under-20. He was not in the side, so they had 2 players missing. And by the way, Caldwell was moaning at that as well. That why should we play with 2 out when teams with 3 out are allowed to postpone? He has a point. When you're talking 24 starts across 2 players, I think he has a really valid point. Now, Doyle's been called up to the England under-20 side because Nico O'Reilly, who plays in the same position as him, has withdrawn through injury. But Nico O'Reilly played against us last night, not injured, for Manchester City under-21s. Look, I think he should have been allowed to call the game off, but I understand why you can't call it off 5 days before. But it's pretty harsh on them, isn't it?
It is, but there has to be a time limit on there. You know, we moan about Sky Sports moving games too soon, and normally that's still 3 weeks away. So if we were going to call a game off within 4 or 5 days, then it would just be a bit of a joke. So there is a level where he can't do it.
It's sporting integrity, isn't it?
It's them, so I don't really care this weekend.
Well, if it was us,
look, if it was us, I would be miffed. Of course I would be. And maybe that's why there needs to be a look at better protocols. I don't really think reducing that time frame is the right way to do it. But look, how far away really are we from just saying that all League One games need to be postponed during international breaks, or at least the international breaks where the under-21s play? I don't believe that is still all of them. I know that there's one a season. I think it might be the March one then, considering they're all playing now. Where the
playing now, Northern Ireland aren't.
Well, some obviously the under-21s as a system is still having some international games this weekend. Whereas I was under the original impression that there was always one of the international breaks where they didn't, but for whatever reason, maybe that's not the case anymore. How far away are we from just calling all League One games off, the same as we do with the Championship and we do with the Premier League? Because I think we've had like 2 games per weekend recently that have actually been on in League One. That kind of itself just makes a little bit of a mockery of League One football if we're only having 2 games on out of the league of the whole weekend. So actually, is this now going to be the lesser of 2 evils going forward? It's something that they'll have to look at in the summer, I think.
Yeah, I don't buy calling them all off, but I think it maybe should be done across a number of starts or something like that. I mean, it's, you know, if we're calling a game off, we've got Dylan Duffy who started twice, Bailey Cadamartri who started 4 games, and JJ McKinnon who hasn't started any. We're calling it off, whereas we'd be generally be okay. But I would rather call it off if we just had Sean Rowan missing, because he's the vital part of the team who started every game. So, and for them to lose, okay, Doyle's 7 starts, so that's okay. There, you know. But for Josh McGuinness and Niskanen, I think it's Niskanen. My apologies if I've got that wrong. I haven't got the details in front of me other than my terrible handwriting. You know, that's 24 starts. I mean, it's the bulk of their team. Now, this could work the other way, because actually this could galvanise them. But when you look at their goals, I think there's only one other player that scored 2 or more goals across their squad in the league. It could be really difficult for them. Now, if they had their full first team, let me tell you, this would be a difficult game for us. A really difficult game. And I think Gary Caldwell is one of the most underrated managers in League One, because he did really well when they first came in the division. His team was then stripped apart. He had a whole new side last season, and they did relatively well again. And now here they are sitting in 11th. They are fan-owned. So in terms of investment and budget, they're working under slightly different protocols to everybody else. I did an interview with their club program with a guy earlier this week, and we were chatting afterwards, sort of saying how difficult it is for clubs that want to be run sustainably to continue to compete when your Wickhams and your Bristol Rovers and Burtons are spending money that you know sustainable clubs don't have or don't want to have to get into debt with. So let me give you some numbers around Exeter City and why a draw in this game would be a good result. They are 5th for crosses into the box at the moment in League One this season. They are 4th for the number of corners this season. XG is more or less the same as us. They've got 16.46, which is just a little bit above us. They have conceded the fewest goals joint with Wrexham, I think, in the whole division. So they've only conceded 10 goals this season. In terms of set pieces, they've scored 8 this season, which makes them 7th in the division. Now, they like to get the ball into the box. The point is, are they trying to get the ball into the box to a focal point, Josh McGuinness, who's now not going to be playing, which is why Gary Caldwell's complaining? Possibly so, rightly so, if that is the case. Of the goals they've conceded 10. The one chink of light here for us is 40% of those goals, or 4, for those that are bad at maths, have been from set pieces. But this is tough, isn't it? It's a second tough away day on the bounce.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And obviously the distance in there as well. I'll be honest, on Tuesday night, last night, I had a bet on the Lincoln Man City under-21s game, and I had us to score over, or the game to have over 4 goals. Came in, perfect. On Saturday, I'm betting on a 0-0 draw, and it sounds unbelievably pessimistic, but I'll be honest, I wouldn't be too surprised. 12:30 kickoff, we saw it against Wigan. I kind of feel like that's the way that it might go. We've already spoken about the fact that they don't really concede too many. They may struggle without their focal point in attack directly in Josh McGuinness, and overall, the fact that they are losing so many of their goals. Yes, okay, we've had such a great midweek in terms of goal scoring, but the team is going to be changing, and we're actually going to have defenders playing again for us on Saturday. At least you'd kind of hope so. Part of me does just feel like this one could be a little bit of a dull not even a mismatch, sorry, just a dull cancel each other out and just struggling to get into the area as much, or at least not to that focal point for them, as you've already mentioned, and for us potentially kind of hitting a brick wall against what is one of the stronger defences. Gary Caldwell really knows how to set his team up. I remember countless times on the Real AFL podcast last season where myself, and whether it was Adam or Matt Isles or whoever it was that we were speaking with at the time, were talking about, okay, could this be the last week of Gary Caldwell's reign? Because he was going like 13, 14 games without a win, then managed to turn it around for a second half of the season that was basically only bested by Derby, Portsmouth, and, well, us. It was an incredible run that Gary Caldwell did, and we can't go underestimating that and their position in the league so far this season. So I'm a little bit pessimistic going into this game, weirdly. I'm not going to predict us to be losing or anything like that, but I think Exeter are a side that a lot of teams are going to be underestimating over the course of this year.
Now, I'm going to take cup games out because actually in their last 2 cup games, they've conceded 5 goals, which is half of the total they've conceded in every single one of their league games. But so far this season, they've beaten Bolton in the league. They've beaten Rotherham in the league. And the most recent win came against Charlton. But they have lost, I think, 5 games. They've lost to Huddersfield, lost to Reading, lost to Blackpool, lost to Northampton, and lost to Peterborough. Now, to be fair, losing to Northampton and Peterborough don't look like great results. Neither of those sides are particularly pulling up trees. And it would surprise you to know that in the Peterborough game, Poku didn't score. They don't draw many. They've drawn 1. Well, they've drawn 2 if you count their League Cup game against Exeter, which against Walsall, which Walsall won on penalties. But their only other game was 0-0 with Wigan. Everyone draws 0-0 with Wigan. It's what we're going to do. So they're on actually in the league. They're not in a great run. They've got 3 points from their last 3 fixtures, losing to 2-1 to Reading and 2-0 to Huddersfield. The key here, and it's going to sound like absolutely stupid, is scoring twice. Because in the league, you score twice against Exeter, you beat them 2-1 Reading, 2-0 Huddersfield, 2-1 Blackpool, 2-1 Peterborough, and 2-1 Northampton. But it's going to be really hard to call. A draw would be a really solid result. You don't know what formation they're going to play. Gary Caldwell mixes it up, a 4 at the back, a 5 at the back, 2 up top, 1 up top. The only thing really that we can, when I say the only thing, I don't mean it's the only way we're going to win the game. But the one thing that we can pin our hopes on is, well, actually, they're missing at least 2 first-team players.
Yeah, and do you know what? It's really interesting. And, we kind of spoke about it earlier. It's just really interesting that Gary Caldwell's come out and made that statement. Or the comms team at the club have decided to come out and make the statement. Because, I don't know about you, but if I was a manager, I wouldn't want to be turning around and saying to my opponents on Saturday, didn't actually really want to play you guys this week. it just seems a little bit daft. I could understand it being said in a post-match press conference, whether they've won, whether they've lost, whether they've drew. It doesn't matter. You could expect that to come up. But to go ahead and say that, it's going to be an interesting reaction to see what it does to our lads and to see how they take that going into the game. Is that going to galvanise us, or is that going to... Well, it's not exactly going to make us feel pity for them or anything daft like that, but it's going to be interesting to see what kind of reaction as the players and Michael Skubala come out with.
Do you not think, though, that they make that sort of statement because, first of all, you've got to, because there's going to be a whole fan base there going, oh, we've got 3 out. Why can't we cancel the game? Because, look, when we didn't have 3 out the other week, where there was only 2 called up, it was Rowan and McKinnon, and everyone was going, well, who else has been called up?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the answer did come out eventually that it was Rico, even though he'd been injured. But fans want to know, and Exeter fans will want to know why the game wasn't called off. Now, if Doyle was on the under 20 standby list, then there's got to be a question as to whether, with 2 players called up, 1 on the standby list, you can call a game off. I thought you could anyway, but potentially not. I don't know. But I think Caldwell has to make that, and also, it's now created a narrative which, if they get a result, will be, look how well we've done. Look at what we've done. It'll be a bigger achievement. If they get a draw, he can now come out and go, we've fought against all the odds and taken a point against, without being arrogant, one of the best sides in the league. Because that's what we are. We're 5th in the league, so we're one of the best sides in the league. So, yeah, I think he had to set the narrative. I don't think there was any choice on that.
No, that's fair. And like I say, I'm just going to be really intrigued to see what the sort of reaction is from us at, win, lose, or draw. Because if we lose now it looks awful. It looks like we've lost against a half decimated team, although they've only lost 3 players out of a squad of 20 something, however big the Exeter squad actually is. But yeah, no, it's going to be really interesting. Like I say, I'm not massively confident going into the game, because I have a lot of respect for Exeter, and I think the way that they do things, and actually the way that I think they play on the pitch as well. We can talk about their off the pitch and the fan-owned side of it plenty, and have a lot of respect for them on that. But, as you've already mentioned earlier on with Gary Caldwell, I feel very much the same way. I think the way that he does things on the pitch is also the right way. I think they take a pragmatic approach in a lot of different matches, which, if we are just going to be going straight back to the 5-3-2, is that something that he's going to have hopefully not, but is that going to be something that he'll have prepared for going into the weekend, and kind of know how to shut up shop with the defence and hope that then they can just get 1 or 2 opportunities on the break, which is something that kind of we have given teams the opportunity to do in certain parts of this season. So, like I say, I'm not massively optimistic, but I'm hoping it's going to be a good game either way.
Yeah, well, I'm an eternal pessimist. I think we can go there and get a point, and I think that would be... I mean, we can go there and win. Let's face it. We can win against anybody at all in this division on any given day. And aside, Birmingham aside, I'd fancy us on any given day to beat somebody if we turn up and we're absolutely on it. But we don't know who's going to be fit for us. We know Tom Hamer won't be. We know Adam Jackson won't be. Lewis Monsma will likely play, so it'll be... At least we'll have that kind of that back 3 again. You would hope the others have come through unscathed, so at least we will have a relatively strong side. Ethan Arahan potentially coming back. From what Michael was saying, he would have played some minutes last night had he not been suspended, so we would expect him to be back, and if he's fit, I would expect him to start as well. But then when Grandal's coming on late yesterday, you don't know. So yeah, it'll be really interesting. Right, 1 hour into the Stacey West podcast, and I think it is time to bring it to a close. So we've spent 30 minutes telling you how good we were against Manchester City's kids in a competition that a lot of people don't even bother going to watch. So that was fun. We briefly touched on Michael Skubala potentially going to Coventry City, which is, the same as me potentially taking Keira Knightley out on a date in 1996. I thought about asking her, but yeah. Anyway, after that, we've obviously now been incredibly pessimistic about Exeter, because every time I'm on the podcast and talk about we should beat a team, Crawley, for instance, we end up losing. If I call a striker out for being rubbish, he ends up scoring. So we've praised Exeter City. So hopefully 6-0 incoming, and we'll all be coming back up the M5 virtually or in reality with 3 points in our back pocket. We have been the Stacey West podcast. This has been the 332nd time that you have allowed us into your ears for an hour or two. There will be many, many more coming, but all that remains to be said is up the imps.
Up the imps.